let's take a listen to something that you had the courage to jump into this contentious moment of public discourse around Israel's attack on Palestine. Let's take a listen.
Sometimes in this journalism business, it is hard to get the words exactly right, particularly in a situation that is complex and layered, which evokes so much deep emotion and conflict, and where people's lives are literally at stake. How does bombing a densely populated land strip filled 50% with children constitute self-defense? How does bombing hospitals, churches, mosques, and UN schools constitute self-defense?
All right. I'm not going to ask the question here. I'm going to let one of my students do it. Let's hear from Nick.
Hi, my name is Nick. I'm a senior at Wake Forest University. And my question is, how do you think about legacy media's historical relationship with the anti-war movement? And what responsibilities do you think the media has in reporting on the Israel-Palestine conflict?
Another excellent question. I think that the problem with the American media going all the way back to World War II, which was the first war in which, World War I was a little bit of it as well. And all of our wars have been filled with government propaganda. But when, newsreels were used during World War II to sort of whip up support for war, is that the relationship between the media and the government is incredibly unhealthy in times of war. We saw that throughout all of our wars. In Vietnam, the code was cracked because Walter Cronkite, who was seen as the most neutral journalist ever in history, cracked it when he said,
"For it seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate. But it is increasingly clear to this reporter that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victors, but as an honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy and did the best they could."
This war is unwinnable. This war can't be won, and this war should no longer be fought. That was not some left-wing liberal journalist who said it. It was Walter Cronkite who said it. And that sort of, woke a lot of people up to the fact that the media has long been used by governments. Openly during the Gulf War. The idea of embedding was invented during the Gulf War, where they said, we'll just take you with us, journalists, and you'll see the war from our soldiers' point of view. So you'll have total empathy for our point of view. We then fast forward to Iraq, and our government outright lied to us about the reasons for the war. We are going to war against Iraq and being told they had weapons of mass destruction and that it had something to do with 9/11. That was not true. But like 70 some odd % of Americans believed it. We bombed Afghanistan. Lo and behold, it turned out Osama bin Laden was not in Afghanistan. He was in Pakistan. And the way we got him was not by bombing Afghanistan into dust. It was by using special forces. And then half a dozen guys got him in Pakistan. The challenge was laid out for us by Dwight Eisenhower when he said the military industrial complex is dangerous in that it creates an incentive for war. Yeah. Recently, Mitch McConnell said the quiet part out loud when he said everyone should support funding for Ukraine and Israel, because not for the core sort of, moral reasons that Biden tries to put out, but because it's great for our economy. That all of those ships and bombs and things are going to be made in the American heartland, and it's going to be great for our economy. Oops, that's the military-industrial complex. Mm-hmm. And so my take on war in general has been to be deeply skeptical of governments, and that we should be deeply skeptical of governments, their incentives, their motives when they go to war. And that doesn't just include our government. When we're looking at analyzing what a foreign government is doing, we should be even more skeptical. And so the idea that we would take at face value anything that the government of a foreign country, Israel, which, for some people, if you are Jewish, it is the state of Israel is deeply personal to you. But for journalists, it is a nation state. It is not an idea. It is not a people. Jewish people live all over the world. It is literally a nation state with a parliament, with a Knesset and a prime minister and a president. And they should be analyzed from a point of view of journalistic skepticism. What I'm concerned about in this situation, as in all the previous ones, is that journalists are only, not only, but for the most part, being told to cover this war as embeds, meaning you have to go along with the IDF, the Jewish Defense Forces. You have to show your footage to the IDF before you can broadcast it, though allegedly they don't look at the packages. Those packages then are essentially propagandistic because they are not independent journalists just looking and seeing what's happening. And so what's happening is that younger people who generally don't watch cable news are not getting their information from the, very carefully crafted IDF screened videos. They're getting them from people who are brave enough to be in Gaza and turn their cameras on, their cameras on. Or, there's some journalists from Reuters and AP, and they are turning their cameras on, and a lot of them are dying. This has been the largest number of journalists killed in a war ever. There have been more bombs dropped in Gaza than have been dropped in Ukraine. And that is in a much shorter period of time, in 40 days. So this is an incredibly deadly war. And so for me, I approach whatever the Israeli government says with as much skepticism as I have toward the Biden administration. Because when the Biden administration speaks, they later sometimes have to update what President Biden says because it turns out not to check out. And that is common in warfare situations where we don't really truly understand their motives. So I wish we were treating this conflict the way that journalists ought to treat it, which is with extreme skepticism of everything that both governments are saying, and with listening equally to the voices of the anti-war movement, who've never gotten a full hearing from the American media, not in Iraq, not in Vietnam, not ever.